Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 1. I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. And Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, answered me and said, Write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rachakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations be unto the Akim, I hear pushing this gospel and truth and its sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Lord willing, fall upon your houses. This is the brother Quanawath, come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And, we're definitely in the time of, as we've been, starting with the elder apostles on down, right, of Great Millstone, right? We've been telling y'all, that we are definitely in, the times of Revelation, the 13th chapter, right, and the fulfillment of it, right? Namely, Revelations 13 verses 14 on down, right, where the RFID microchip, which is the MO to the TB, the mark of the beast, right, is going to be made mandatory, right? And we see, right, the buildup towards that fulfillment, or happening right before our eyes, right? We understand that there was, recently, and there is now, right, as we're reading in this article on the end time headlines, right, there is a push to get rid of pennies, to get rid of, to basically round up the money, and eventually they're going to do away with cash altogether, right? This is just another step towards making cash, right, physical currency obsolete, right, forcing everyone, right, to go to a digital currency, right? We understand that there is the stable coin, right? You got the Stable Act, the Genius Act, right? Those have already passed. Those have already been signed into law, right? And we're waiting, right, for the Clarity Act, right, to kind of get sorted out and get passed into law as well, right? Which that's kind of teeter-tottering, but nonetheless, right, according to prophecy, that will, whether that bill keeps getting revised, or at some point it will get passed, right? And there will be a further push, right, to get rid of, the physical currency, which we've seen already happen and take place in Nigeria as well as other places, right? They're gone full digital, right? Cash is being burned in the streets, right? And everything is completely digital, right? Trying to, again, go into a digital society, right? But let's get into this article. I do got a couple, a few articles that I want to touch on. Lord will, we'll get to it. But I want to start right here. End time headlines, right? It says Senate passes bill that could change how you pay with cash, right? It says August 13th. It says the U.S. Senate has moved the nation one decisive step closer to permanently ending production of the penny and potentially overhauling the nickel, approving legislation that could reshape everyday cash transactions for millions of Americans. According to a report from the Hill, the Senate passed the Common Sense Act by unanimous consent on Friday, advancing a measure that had already cleared the House, right? It says the bill formally directs the end of 1-cent coin production for circulation, right? Getting rid of the penny. It says the U.S. Mint already produced its final circulating pennies last year, though special collectible versions tied to the nation's 250th anniversary entered circulation earlier this year. It says existing pennies would remain legal tender under the legislation. The Federal Reserve will be required to limit disruptions in the remaining supply of the coins. It says, with pennies increasingly scarce at the register, the Common Sense Act also seeks to resolve the practical headaches of cash payments. It would explicitly allow businesses the option to round cash transactions to the nearest nickel, right? A purchase totaling $19.82, for example, would be rounded down to $19.80, while $19.83 will be rounded up to $19.85. Some states and localities currently prohibit such roundings, creating a patchwork of rules that advocates say the federal measures could clarify, right? So they're going to be rounding up, rounding down, right? Which some places are going to ultimately they're going to lose money, right? So they're going to have to change their prices. You're going to have a lot of stores and whatnot, right? There's going to get some backlash, from these companies, if you will, right? They're going to have to ultimately charge more, or charge less, right? For that product, right? Because of the pennies, right? They're going to have to just single, a dollar amounts, right? None of this $4.99 or $19.99, because this can be rounded up to that dollar anyways, which is going to cost the American people, right, more money. It says the Common Sense Act formally calls for the end of penny production. The report states, underscoring the bill's core intent, more than 300 billion pennies are estimated to remain in circulation, roughly more than 800 per U.S. citizen, yet many retailers already struggle to provide them as change, right? And again, this is the end of the article, but, we understand, right, as we read, matter of fact, we'll grab it in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11, right? It says, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices, right? His evil plots, his evil schemes, right? Matter of fact, let's grab that word Satan, right? Because it's really talking about Esau, Edom, right? The self-proclaimed so-called white man, 2 Corinthians 2 and 11, right? Let's grab that word Satan. Shaitan, right? It says Strong's G 4567, right? Satanist, right? Which again is Esau, right? But let's grab it, right? It says an adversary, one who opposes another in purpose or act, right? It says right here, a Satan-like man, right? A Satan-like man, right? This is talking about Esau, Edom, right? As you read in 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, it says, that his coming is, after the working of Satan, right? Talk about the wicked, right? Which we know is Esau, Edom, right? Today will be the self-proclaimed so-called white man, right? Right? We're not ignorant of his, as it's reading in an NLT, it says, so that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes, right? His plots. We understand what's going on, right? Them ultimately coming after the penny, right? This right here is not just going to stop at the penny. It's not going to stop at, the nickel, the quarter, the dimes, the physical dollar, right? It's not going to stop there. Eventually, he's going to try to get rid of physical currency as a whole, right? $100 bill, $50 bills, $20 bills, so on and so forth, right? Because again, he wants to bring in, a digital society, right? And that everyone, he wants everyone to ultimately, be attached, to this digital system via the RFID microchip, man. That's what he wants. So let's go to this article, right, that I have pulled up. This is on the Cairoscene.com. It says new SIM cards to require facial biometric verification, right? Require, right? Again, going back to, the Revelations, right? 13 and verses 16, right? Let's grab that real quick, right? Esau is moving, right? This is Revelations 13 and verse 16, right? Matter of fact, let's see if we can read it in the We'll read it in the KJV first. Revelation 13, verse 16, it says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." So again, right, this is talking about the actual little rice grain, right, that they're going around putting in people's hands, right, as well as the brain ones, right, the brain hips, the brain chips that they're putting in people's head, Neuralink, as well as other, biotech companies. They're already doing this, and this right here, right, is just another step in that direction, right? The SIM card, right, that you have in your phones, whatnot. That's not the mark of the beast. But yet again, right, him making this mandatory, right, making it to where now you gotta, you have to have, your face, right, facial recognition in order to, have a phone, right? Because when we get into it, right, it says facial biometric verification will become mandatory for activating new mobile SIM cards in Egypt within the next month, as the National Telecom Regulatory Authority, or NTRA, moves to curb unauthorized registration and strengthen the protection of subscribers' personal data, right? So they're ultimately making it, because, as we read, right, they're going to say, 4,000 complaints, right, about people getting onto their accounts and finding random numbers, right, that they never purchased or anything like that on their account, right? So they're using crime, right? They're using, theft and digital crime as a reason, right, to make it to where now you got to use, your facial recognition. It's going to move forward. It's going to move further than that, right? Because they're going to, you got AI and this, that, and the third, right? They're going to say that, you got to be able to put it in your hand, right? They're going to move from facial recognition to now you got to have the actual device in your hand. It says a new system will require customers to present their national ID cards and sign the standard service contract before completing an automated facial recognition check. SIM cards will only be activated once the system confirms that the purchaser's face matches the identification document, with the process carried out entirely through technical verification rather than human review. According to NTRA, a biometric data will not be stored by mobile operators, and it will be. That's why they're building these data centers. All your information is going to be stored, and it's going to eventually, right, be on that device that they put in your hand. Right? It says the authority said the rollout comes after receiving around 4,000 complaints from citizens who discovered mobile lines had been registered in their names without their knowledge. Mohammed Ibrahim, executive vice president and spokesperson for the NTRA, confirmed that cases involving violations have been referred to the public prosecution, while mobile operators have been briefed on the new regulatory procedures. All right, testing of the facial verification system is already underway, with implementation expected to be completed within 1 month. Until then, the sale of company-issued SIM cards has been suspended. The authority also plans to review existing company lines to ensure they remain in the possession of their registered users, right? For Egyptians living abroad, the verification process will be available either through a representative in Egypt holding a valid power of attorney or remotely once the system becomes operational. The NTRA said the measures are intended to end long-standing issues surrounding SIM card registration while strengthening the security of subscribers' personal information. And again, right, they're making it mandatory, right? So again, this is, and we know that Esau works in gradualism, right? So Esau will start to make, just like he did with the age verification, right? In order to, insert, like in the UK, right? In order for somebody, I think it's 15 or 16 or older or younger, my bad, to get on to the internet, you have to have, you have to verify, your age. You have to get parent consent, and the parents have to verify, and so on and so forth. Also in the UK, right? In order for you to be able to work now, they made it mandatory, right? That you have to have a digital ID in order to work in the UK. Same as Mexico, right? So Esau moves, right? And it's all, all has to do with this digital system, right? In order for you to be able to have, a new phone line, right? You gotta give up your biometric data, right? Where is it being stored? Why do you need that? And again, it's a step towards making the RFID microchip mandatory, man. Every time that we see them, age verification, biometric, in order to receive this or order to receive, they're making it all mandatory. Getting you people used to having to, something being mandatory, right? Seeing that word mandatory, right? In order for you to be able to do certain things, man. And a lot of these people, man, it goes right over your heads, right? Because you're not paying attention. But see, the Lord Yahweh B'Shem El Shai set up prophets to tell you and to show you, the times we're in and what's coming. We're in that time, man. This is heavy information right here, right? And this was a few days ago, right? August the 11th, right? 2026, right? They're making it mandatory, right? For you to ultimately, scan your face, in order to get a SIM card, right? Your face, right? Well, your forehead, your face, right? They're right there, right? Eventually, you're going to be scanning your forehead. Eventually, you're going to be scanning your hand, right? Because again, these data centers that are going up really all over the world, but mainly here in America, right? It's going to house all your information, And in order for you to be able to, again, right, in order for you to be able to participate in society, right, in all aspects, right, you're going to have that RFID microchip, man. These are the times where, that we're fastly approaching. We see it happening, right? Again, Habakkuk the 2nd chapter, at the end it shall speak and not lie. It's speaking loud and clear, right? Via these different policies and different movements, right? When dealing with, this digital, system, right? Different policies and legislation and acts and so on and so forth that are being introduced, right? Like in Kenya, right? They're making it to where your birth certificate, your social security card, right? It's all digital, all the newborns and whatnot, everything is digital for them, and then at first they tell you, you can opt in or opt out, but then what? They move into, and they come up with these different, people lose their cards, or they lose this, or, people are able to break in and steal your information, so on and so forth. And then they're gonna move to what? Okay, well, nobody can steal a C-hip out your hand, and that's how they're gonna play it, like these devils always do, man. But we see what's coming, man. We see, what's going on. We're not ignorant, of his devices, his evil plots, his evil schemes, man. So what do you how about Shemel Shah? But let's go ahead and we'll read this again and we'll close out. It's Revelations 13, verse 16. It says, and he causeth all, both small and rich, it's like both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive an MARK in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the MARK or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So in order for you to be able to participate in society, you're gonna need the RFID microchip, man. And this is where we see society going, right? And again, globally, right? It's not just here in America, right? It's not just, in certain places in the world, right? Eventually this is gonna be made mandatory across the entire world, right? Revelations 3 and 10, right? It's going to try the entire world, man. Right? We're under a global technocracy, as the elders, consistently go into. A global technocracy, right? Technocracy is basically a government being ran by the technological elites. Your open AI CEOs and your Elon Musk and so on and so forth. They're the ones that are in control. They're the ones that are, helping to usher in this digital society, man. The CEOs of Nvidia's and Apple, Microsoft, so on and so forth, man. But I just wanted to touch on that, man. Get that out there. Lord wills, that fine. Lord will, straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Merchak Kodash, that belongs to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.